Why don't we talk a little bit about that 0% project? Because I think that's been getting some headlines recently, right? As you're wont to do, you get a lot of headlines in the work that you do. And this new project is pretty fascinating to me. I stopped by your booth at SHOT Show to see it in action and see, the different components together. And it's really quite a fascinating response, I think, to what the ATF has proposed as a solution to the issue of 80% lowers or unfinished firearms receivers. The ATF, obviously, and the Biden administration specifically wants to expand the government's regulatory power in order to try and get at unfinished receivers. They call, obviously, the colloquial term is ghost gun, because these tend to be, once finished, they don't require a serial number. And that's been the case in the entire history of the country. But this is an issue in recent years that a lot of Democrats and gun control advocates are concerned about. They don't want anyone to own a gun that doesn't have a serial number on it so that the ATF can trace it if it shows up in a crime. This is the basic debate going on. But they put out a rulemaking document that, if taken to its limits, could certainly have basically they want to say that anything that has a certain number of components in it, the fire control group area, the magazine, well, and a number of other things could be considered a firearm receiver, which would then have to be regulated by the licensing process under the Gun Control Act, which entails putting a serial number on it, getting a license to sell, to manufacture and sell it to the public. And they also want to extend this power to anything that could be, quote, readily converted to a finished receiver. And so they don't give many hard guidelines as to what readily converted to means in their definition. But one of the cases that they had pointed to involved 8 hours in a fully stocked machine shop, which, when you're talking about, especially an AR-15 lower, I have an AR-15 lower here for those on YouTube. Let's see what one looks like. This is the regulated part. It's called a strip lower in the community. And you could go from a block of metal to one of these probably in 8 hours if you know what you're doing. And so this is one of the problems with the proposed rule, is that it gives an extremely expansive view of the law, which allows the ATF to have quite a lot of power in determining what they want to regulate. But in that regulation, as you pointed out to me at SHOT Show, they do have a paragraph where they describe how they would not try to regulate just bar stock of metal. And I guess that's where the idea that you guys came up with sprung from, right? Is that a good summation of how this happened?
I think so. If you don't mind me venturing my own restatement, because this is it's so tedious and there's so many pages and there's so many ways they approach it that it is it overwhelms you. They baffle you with bullshit. It's meant to put you to sleep and then just intimidate you into thinking, well, the ATF can do whatever they want, which is exactly what they want. But in all this new 100 pages of stuff they throw at you to expand the definition of a firearm, we know, because they say that they don't intend to regulate molds and raw pieces of material, right. Unformed, stock, raw pieces of material. And like I told you at SHOT Show, well then, they screwed up, because we'll just go from a raw piece of material and we'll go right back into 100% on our piece of equipment. And we don't have to worry about all these other tests for readily convertible or, readily identifiable. Like they define all these other tests. There's this 8-part scenario they create. It's like we can forget about all of it, because at least in the last draft of the rule that I saw, which will probably be changed now that we've demoed 0% this way.
That could be.
They go out of their way to say, well, of course we wouldn't regulate raw blocks of metal. So now 0%, I think, should be, as a commercial concept, should be considered by us and others as any concept that wants to go from a raw piece of metal that's not formed in any way to become a receiver into a receiver. And that's the type of software that we'll begin shipping on and supporting on the Ghost Gunner.
Yeah, and that it's interesting to me, right? Because one thing I had pointed out to you, and interested on your thoughts a little more on this, that section in the proposed rule, it's kind of an aside. It's like a promise. They want all this regulatory authority, and then they promise we don't want to go after raw materials.
Right.
So, it seems to me, obviously, that's something that could just be removed at any point. But but practically speaking, it's probably impossible for them. It's literally impossible for them to try and regulate all aluminum bar stock, because you're the key component for this 0% idea that you guys are putting out now. This code for your machine. So I should briefly explain what the Ghost Gunner is. It's a CNC machine, right? It's a mill. It's a compact CNC machine that people can use. You could use it for anything you could use a CNC machine for, right? But obviously you guys make software that helps, finish firearms parts in the CNC machine. But yeah, so you can take what is effectively a stock piece of aluminum that you could buy at any store that sells, aluminum to a person. And then you can take that and make the necessary cuts in it to create the key component of a low receiver. I mean, I guess this is something that people might not understand if they haven't seen it.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it if you want.
Yeah, because it's not like the one I just showed is a full finished stripped lower all in one piece. Your design is a little bit different than that, right?
Yeah, we made, so in our first commercial 0% package, we took an AR low receiver and split it, you could say, into 3 parts. And this is just to save material and to help you make it from small stock sizes where you're not wasting a lot of time and material yourself.
Right.
And that keeps the concept commercial. But the idea is once you make the components or buy some of the others, you bolt it back together. Kind of like the Frankenlower in the early, like the Frankenstoner, I think it was called, in the early 80% days. There's been ideas like this before, but we were basically trying to demo at SHOT Show the tightest, most commercial package that we had, where you only, let's say, have to put about 8 hours of time into the machine, and then everything else, it doesn't matter because ATF doesn't regulate it. You can just add on those parts, buy them, and you can make them, or you can even 3D print one of them. And we're just trying to show this combination of techniques that gets around the rule. But I can also point out that we had some fixtures at our booth from one of our developers who truly is supporting just a giant block of metal in multiple degrees of freedom, where you can cut on that thing for 16 hours and you'll get the entire lower receiver, just like the one that you showed. So there's lots of ways to get there. The concept we're trying to show is no matter what, you can start with a raw piece of material. But we think our concept is a bit more insidious and difficult to regulate, because every component will come from is a stock extrusion size, which you don't have to get from us, you can get from anyone. And our gambit is ATF will never tell Home Depot or Metals for You or whoever it is, to regulate these bar stock components.